Welcome to the Private School Leader Podcast, where private school leaders learn how to thrive and not just survive as they serve and lead their schools. I strongly believe that it is possible to have a long and happy and fulfilling career as a private school leader. And my passion is to help you figure out exactly how to do just that, right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And I'm your host, Mark Minkus. So if you've listened to even one episode of this podcast, you know that I really like to talk about a few leadership traits in particular that I think are super important for you to be successful as a private school leader. And so integrity, we've talked about that a lot. Empathy, we've certainly talked about that a lot on the podcast. And I'd say emotional intelligence and also resilience are some of the most important leadership traits for you to be successful. But what if I told you that there's a very important leadership trait that most leaders neglect and that it actually could be holding you back as a leader? Well, this trait, according to some statistics in Harvard Business Review and a few other places, this leadership trait makes you 40% more likely to get promoted, whether that's from division head to head of school, but this is across all industries, 40% more likely to be promoted. According to Harvard Business Review, you're 27% more effective at work if you display this leadership trait, and 94% of employees are more likely to stay in the organization if their boss has this trait. And you're 50% more likely to live longer. But here's the thing. This is something that most people aren't really focusing on because there's only about 50 to 75 Google searches per day on this leadership trait. 50 to 75 Google searches a day, that's such a low number. So, what is it? What is this important leadership trait that's underrated and possibly being neglected? It's likability. Likability. And so today on this episode of the Private School Leader Podcast, we are going to discuss your most underrated leadership trait and how to build it. And we're going to talk about why it is so important to build the leadership trait of likability. And just for a moment before we jump into that topic today, just wanted to let you know that if you're listening to this in real time, last week, a lot of schools in the South, their teachers returned to campus, and several schools during their teacher in service last week used Parent Academy, and they used the two 45-minute plug-and-play teacher PDs, and the feedback has been really good, and there's still time for you, because I know private schools start at different times all over the country, all over the world, and there's still time for you to use this as part of your teacher in service. And so just imagine that 27-page printable notebook sitting in front of your teachers. Up on the screen is the plug-and-play PD, and I'm going to teach your teachers part 1 and part 2 of building effective relationships with private school parents. And we're going to help your teachers be more proactive, be more responsive, surprise and delight, the client service model instead of customer service model, how to break down the wall of mutual distrust, and much, much more. And so if this is something that you're interested in to find out a little bit more, the privateschoolleader.com/Parent Academy is where you can go to find out more. And like I said, there's still time to make this part of your teacher in service. The privateschoolleader.com/Parent Academy. And then speaking of parents, I want to give you a free resource that I created about a month and a half ago, and it's called The 4 Worst Things Parents Believe About Your School and How to Change Their Minds. And I don't know about you, but I get really frustrated when parents believe things about my school that aren't true. And sometimes I also get really discouraged, but unfortunately, parent perception is pretty much their reality. So I've created a PDF guide that will talk you through the 4 super problematic things that parents probably believe about your school, but more importantly, I'm going to teach you how to change their minds. So if you go to theprivateschoolleader.com/believe, you can grab your free guide called The 4 Worst Things Parents Believe About Your School and How to Change Their Minds. Again, that's a free PDF for you over at theprivateschoolleader.com/believe, and I want to give that to you as a free resource and just as a gift to say thank you for listening to the podcast every week. So here's the thing about likability. Some people think that they're either likable or not. And you interact with people, and some people are likable, and some people you don't want to be around. Some people, some leaders, many leaders think that likability is just something that you're born with. You either have it or you don't have it. But I want to change your paradigm today, because not only do I believe strongly that likability is a leadership trait, but I actually think that it's a leadership skill that you can build. You can build the skill of likability. And we're not worried about whether or not people like us. We know that when most of us came up through as educators and then became leaders, and we know that if we were in a popularity contest and tried to get the kids and the parents to like us when we were teaching in the classroom, that was a recipe for disaster. That's not what I'm talking about. What I am talking about is that there's a lot of statistics to support that likability is very, very underrated when it comes to our leadership skills. So we're going to talk about why it matters, and then more importantly, I'm going to teach you 4 ways that you can increase your likability, 4 ways that you can be more likable as a leader at your school. So why does likability matter? Well, first of all, I want you to think about how trust is your currency at school. Trust is your currency. So with your teachers, with your leadership team, with students that you interact with the parents, with the donors, what you're trying to do is build trust. So if trust is the currency, then what's a fast route to trust? Likability. Being liked is often the fastest route to being trusted. So let me give you an example. There's a phrase in sales, know, like, trust. Know, like, trust. And if someone is going to purchase something, especially if it's something of great value, whether it's a car or a home or some kind of service, or perhaps they're going to decide what doctor or dentist or therapist to use, when we as consumers are going to purchase something, if it's just a transaction and we're buying some bananas and a gallon of milk at the grocery store, then there doesn't need to be no, like, trust. But if you're in your 50s, early 50s, and you're thinking about, we really need to get around to hiring a financial advisor, it's about know the person and then grow to like the person, and then you grow to trust the person. And so a big thing in sales is know, like, trust. And you're like, well, Mark, I'm not into sales. I run a school. And it's like, okay, I get that, but I'm talking about trust being your currency. You want to build trust in your school. Knowing you, liking you, leads to trusting you. And whether you're leading at a teacher's meeting, or you're resolving a parent conflict, or you're standing up in front of parents on back to school night, or you're greeting prospective families at an open house, your ability to connect with people on a human level and your likability, it really has a huge impact on how well your message lands or whether it doesn't land. And if you're going to get up there, and I want to acknowledge that a lot of my coaching clients, and so I'm sure that a lot of you are very uncomfortable with public speaking. And there's a way to be likable with your public speaking, but honestly, for this episode, I'm thinking more about those one-on-one or small group interactions. And so we're talking about why it matters. Trust is your currency. Likability is the fast route to trust. the know, like, trust model of sales. And the way we interact has a lot to do with whether our message lands and how long it's retained. And here's the thing, you could have an amazing vision for your school and a really solid strategic plan, and you could have an awesome team. But if you're not that likable as the leader and people don't find you approachable or they find you kind of hard to read, all of that stuff doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have a brilliant vision or a solid strategic plan or a talented team. If you're not likable, if you're not approachable. I had a coaching client who I'm doing the get to know you 20-minute call, and I'm listening, and I'm like, well, I'm not sure what I can help this person with, because he was crushing it with, a lot of different things at the school. And so finally I said, well, what's the major problem for you? And he said, that's easy. He said, everything that's going on the inside, I wear it on my face and with my body language on the outside. And it's very off-putting to people. And so this amazing leader with all of these great ideas and work ethic and everything else, the thing that was getting in the way was that he was giving off a vibe that people didn't like. And so, of course, that's one of the things that we worked on. So you want to be influential at your school. You want your hard work to matter. I'm just trying to shine a light on why likability matters. So then the question becomes, how do I build this skill? How can I be more likable? And here's what I want you to hear this. I know that there are a lot of introverted leaders out there. And I think that a lot of introverts think that being likable is equal to being an extrovert. And that's not true. You don't need to be an extrovert to be likable. You just need to be intentional about some things. And so, again, I'm just asking for you to have an open mind, and I'm going to try to help you with this underrated leadership skill and hopefully have you see why it's important, but also how can I improve this skill. So our 4 ways to be more likable: number 1, enthusiasm and optimism. Number 2 is authenticity. Number 3, empathy. And number 4 is to master likable body language. So number 1 is enthusiasm/optimism. And you've heard me talk before about how it's important for you to be the most optimistic person, the most upbeat person at your school, because everyone else takes their lead from you. And if you're walking around doom and gloom and there's a dark cloud following you, and some of you are probably Seinfeld fans, and George Costanza one time was talking to Jerry at the diner, and George was notorious for not really doing very much work at his job. And he's like, oh, well, people think I'm busy all the time and they don't bother me. And so that's what George said. And Jerry's like, well, how's that? And he's like, well, I just look agitated. And George pantomimed and demonstrated, looking very grumpy and sighing and, and you just this body language that was giving off this completely clear message that I'm super busy. And then Jerry's like, yeah, you do look really busy. So my point is that the thing that we're giving off, whether it's that we're too busy to be approachable, whether we're too grumpy and we're riding the emotional roller coaster, whatever, it's picked up on, and then it either attracts or repels. That's what I want you to think about when we talk about likability. Your personality, your behavior, it either attracts or it repels. So to lean into this idea of enthusiasm and optimism, enthusiasm is contagious. And there was research from both Stanford University and Harvard University that says that people are more likely to follow leaders who project positive energy and optimism. And that's especially true when the stress is high or when there's a crisis. So you want people to follow you. You want good staff retention. You want good teacher morale. optimism is a pretty big key for that to happen. And some people think that like being an optimist or being enthusiastic or kind of like being a little bit over the top is like goofy and disingenuous, but I don't agree. And again, I'm coming at it from the bias that I was very much in the 33 years where I was leading at school, that I was very optimistic and I was very enthusiastic. But there's a lot of research out there to support that enthusiasm is contagious. People like enthusiastic and optimistic people. And it's almost like breathing more oxygen, pumping more oxygen into your school. You know, one of the things that they do in casinos to keep people in there longer, they do a lot of things, but there's no windows in a casino typically, so you don't know what time it is. There are no clocks in a casino, and they also pump in oxygen. And so that you feel more alive and more energized even if you've been in there for a long time. Because the longer that you're in the casino, the more money you're going to spend/lose. And so I really believe that optimism and enthusiasm can be like you pumping oxygen into your school. And so what does optimism and enthusiasm look like? Well, I just think I want to give you this phrase, hopeful energy. When you come into a room, when you are walking down the hall, is it a optimistic, positive, hopeful energy? Do you add positive energy to the situation? Okay. And then when you're talking about challenges or mistakes or difficulties at the school, are you focusing the words you say, are you focusing on what's possible? Are you focusing on the opportunity? Or are you picking apart what's broken? And another thing that likability / in the context of enthusiasm and optimism looks like is that as leaders, we really don't have the right to complain. We can't complain, and we can't be negative, overly negative. Feedback can be honest, and it doesn't have to be all positive. I'm not talking about feedback here, okay? I'm talking about just like, I never complain about the weather. And the reason for that is because I feel like there's enough things that we can get justifiably annoyed about, like the weather. We can't absolutely can't control it. And so here's my point. You're out and about in the school. Are you negative? Are you able to jump on that bandwagon of people that are complaining? And this is a question for you when you're having a good day or when you're having a bad day. When things are spiraling outside of school, at home, the way that we show up with that optimism and that enthusiasm is going to be a huge indicator, not only on your likability, but it's contagious, and that's going to have a big impact on your staff and how much they complain and how negative they are versus more optimistic, more positive. And so just to wrap up point number one, how do we grow this skill, this trait, this piece of the puzzle of enthusiasm and optimism? Well, first of all, just be, again, upbeat, positive energy. Smiling is huge. If you only take one thing away from this episode, likability equals smiling. A genuine smile in almost every situation, except for the ones where it's a very serious meeting or it's a very serious conversation. A genuine smile can change everything. And sometimes I think we're too distracted and too busy to smile. And we're too harried and too frazzled and too busy playing whack-a-mole with our hair on fire to smile. A genuine smile is huge for optimism, enthusiasm, and likability. I also think that it's a big deal for you to display school spirit. And I want to recognize the bias that I have because I was kind of over the top with school spirit. We've talked about it before on the podcast. Your school spirit is contagious. Nelson Mandela said that when we let our light shine, we unconsciously give permission for other people to let their light shine as well. And if you want your staff and your students to have more school spirit, it starts with you. And maybe you're not comfortable putting on the tutu and the crazy hat and, on spirit days, but, you can certainly wear the gear and do as much as you can and push yourself out of your comfort zone when it comes to displaying school spirit. A couple more ways that you can show this enthusiasm and optimism is just don't take yourself so seriously. Be humble, be a little self-deprecating, lift up the situation, don't bring down the situation. Use solution-focused language, like instead of, well, this won't work, you could say, well, what haven't we tried? Or what if we tried this? Or what does someone have an idea of something else that we could try? And here's the thing. It's not toxic positivity, because I did a whole episode on the difference between optimism and toxic positivity. And that is and I'm going to link that in the show notes. And so I just want to make sure that you know that I'm not talking about, hey, everything's great, like going around on the Titanic as it's sinking and saying, yeah, everything's awesome, everything's great. That's toxic positivity. That's not what we're talking about. So enthusiasm and optimism can help us displaying enthusiasm and optimism can help us be more likable. Number 2 on our list is authenticity. So why does it matter? Well, people like being around people who are comfortable in their own skin. And that's one of the ways that I think that we can show authenticity, is to just be more comfortable in your own skin. And I realize that that's like easy to say and really, really hard to do, because maybe you're anxious around people or large groups, or I have a couple of coaching clients who they don't like the first 2 weeks of school in the month of May because there's a lot of interactions where there's small talk and they hate making the small talk. Okay, I get that. But again, the more that we do it, hopefully the more comfortable we can be, because it's exhausting to perform and to put on a performance and earn our Academy Award for being this other version of this person. Let's just be ourselves. I think that's super, super important. There's research from organizational psychologist Dr. Tasha Eurich, and says that what she found in her research was authentic leaders are seen as 23% more effective. That's a big number. And here's the thing. Your teachers and your students, they have really good BS sniffers. They can spot a fake a mile away. And I think when you're practicing authenticity, it helps you to earn respect. So what does it look like, authenticity, to, in the context of being more likable? Well, we don't wear masks, and we just show up as our true selves. Authentic leaders also, you speak with your real voice and not a performative version of you and how you sound. And we don't try to be someone that we're not. And just be you. I know you might feel insecure, but the more that you are trying to just be you, the more comfortable that will become over time. And how we can grow this trait, this skill of authenticity, is to just drop the leader act, quote unquote. So do you have an act where you're acting like a leader? Just be the leader. Use language that sounds like you. Let people see the person behind the title. Be vulnerable. Say, I don't have the answers, but I'm listening to you. I'd like to hear more about that. A couple weeks ago, I did an episode about the 4 things that trustworthy leaders say. I don't know. I'm sorry. Just owning those kinds of things, being authentic. And again, just being yourself. So easier said than done, yes, but people want to follow authentic leaders, and being authentic makes you more likable. And that brings us to number 3 on our list, and that's empathy. So we talk a lot about empathy on this podcast, and so I'm not going to spend much time on it, but if you know that empathy builds trust and it creates psychological safety. And psychological safety can help you build the culture that you want. It leads to strong teacher retention numbers, student retention numbers, better scores on the parent survey. Like, there's so many reasons why having empathy at school and empathy as a leader matters. But when we practice empathy and we try to improve in this area, how do we grow this? I just think a lot of it has to do with active listening, not interrupting, not trying to solve the problem. When they're done talking, say things like, first of all, and then validate their feelings and acknowledge their concerns. Don't compare experiences. If someone's telling you about, their father passed away 2 days prior and blah, 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 you don't need to bring up about when your father passed away, okay? You don't, if they're, recovering from wisdom teeth coming out, you don't have to tell your wisdom tooth story, okay? That's very off-putting. Just validate those emotions and those feelings, acknowledge their perspective, throw some compassion in there. You know how to lead with empathy. I don't need to tell you this, but when you show empathy, when you're listening but not listening with the intent to respond, we all have that bias towards action and problem solving, and we're listening, they're talking, and we're not really listening because we're thinking about how to solve this problem for them and then just open our mouth and start solving it. That's not what people want most of the time. And so you already know what it looks like to be an empathic leader. And so empathy is one of the keys to being more likable. And then number 4 on our list to wrap it up is to master likable body language. So nonverbal communication makes up over 60% of how others perceive us. That's Albert Mehrabian's has some classic research on that. 60% of how others perceive us is our nonverbals. And so that means you could say all the right things and say it well and say it in a likable way. But if your body language is off, then you won't be seen as likable. And so what does likable body language look like? I'm just going to go through a few of these here and not really make much of a comment on it. I'm going to mention warm, genuine smile again. A warm, genuine smile, an open posture. We've heard about this before. You learned about this in speech or communications class in a high school or an undergrad, that we're not crossing our arms, even crossing your legs, depending on the situation, but especially crossing your arms when you're standing and having a conversation. We're going to have an open posture, relaxed facial expressions. And then also, while we're talking about facial expressions, just nodding and some micro reactions and changing your facial expression during the conversation. One of the most off-putting parents that I ever had to deal with was there was this mom, and I would have a meeting with her, and let's say the meeting was 20 minutes long, and maybe her facial expression changed like once during the meeting. And it was just so uncomfortable for me. It's uncomfortable for you too. And then, so nodding, micro reactions, changing your facial expression. It's a relaxed facial expression, not a tense facial expression. Eye contact, and I know that one can get a little tricky, but you're not, not too much, not too little, just, kind of, that takes practice to get to that point where you feel comfortable with the amount of eye contact in a conversation, but also respecting their personal space. Someone that in your lifetime who did not understand the idea of personal space, and that person was not likable. So just understand personal space and respect people's personal space. How can we be aware of it and also grow in this area as far as the body language? The first thing is to be aware and be intentional, because we're just so busy that we just do, and we don't often think or pause or try to be a curious observer of ourselves. And sometimes we don't know how we look. I think that if we saw ourselves in the mirror, there'd be several times a day and we'd be like, oof, I didn't know I was putting out that vibe. And so just be aware and be intentional. about being open, being friendly, that friendly, genuine smile. And then here's a good one. There's when I was looking through the literature on likability, to mirror your listener's tone and energy, that actually helps to build subconscious rapport. So if you don't want to match the energy of a parent who's all wound up and all upset, we know about not matching their energy. But when you can mirror the tone, and you again, the facial expressions, the active listening, the nodding, so on and so forth, it can build that rapport. And just think about, here's the last thing that I'll leave you with before we do our big takeaways. Think about people that you like. Think about people that are likable or charismatic, and those are two different things, by the way. I'm not saying that you need to be charismatic. I'm trying to help you be intentional about being more likable, because that's going to help you be more successful and have better relationships and build trust in your school. But just think about people that you interact with that are likable, and what are some of the things that they do that make them likable. I think we just don't stop and think about this kind of stuff. And so that's why I wanted to do this episode, is because I was really surprised by what the research says about how important it is, but also what the research says about how infrequently this is searched on Google and how little attention leaders typically give to this important leadership trait. So what are our big takeaways from today's episode? The 4 ways to be more likable: show enthusiasm and optimism. Number 2, authenticity. Number 3, empathy. And number 4 is to master likable body language. And your call to action for today's episode is to just pick one of these 4, the one where you think that you probably need the most work. Just pick one of these 4 and take one action. I've given you some actions that you can try. Pick one and then take one action. And just a quick reminder that you still have time to include Parent Academy as part of Teacher in Service, and go to theprivateschoolleader.com/Parent Academy to learn more and to read testimonials from private school leaders and teachers who have done the plug and play PD training. And then another reminder that you can grab your free copy of the 4 worst things parents believe about your school and how to change their minds by going to theprivateschoolleader.com/believe. And I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at mark.o.minkus@gmail.com and just tell me something that you got from a podcast episode that helped you, and also your pain point that is going into the new school year. What's the biggest pain point or biggest concern that you have? And maybe that becomes an upcoming episode. The show notes for today are at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 147. And if you would leave a review and a rating wherever you listen to this podcast, I'd really appreciate it. That helps the algorithm push this out as suggested content to leaders all over the world. And you can connect with me on Instagram at theprivateschoolleader. And I ask every week, but it's the biggest way to help others, is to just please share the link to this podcast to another leader in your life or an aspiring leader at your school. And I've been your host, Mark Minkus. I want to say how much I appreciate you and all the amazing work that you're doing for those lucky kids and teachers at your school. Thank you so much for taking some of your precious time to join me here today. And I'll see you next time right here on the Private School Leader Podcast. And until then, always remember to serve first, lead second, and make a difference.